Hi, I'm Pete Holloway. I'm a former financial advisor and a former CFP, and I'm very glad to be with you again on money. You know, we hear this an awful lot. There's nothing to do in Wheeling. Well, let's face it. Every weekend at the Heritage Port, something's going on. And I was at the Symphony at a recent concert, and at the other end of town at West Banco Arena, they had bull riding. Now, I realize there's a conflict, but I don't think those two groups are going to overlap very much. We're going to be talking today about the history of the Greater Wheeling Sports and Entertainment Authority, which brings entertainment to Wheeling. And you say, what's the big deal about that? It's very important economically to the city. My guest today is the city manager, Bob Herron. I think almost everybody would know of him. A native of Carrollton, Ohio, he got a business administration degree from West Liberty and has served as city manager or within the cities of Belleville, Michigan, Conneaut, Ohio, Greenville, Michigan. He's married, has 3 children, one of whom is now a surgeon at Wheeling Hospital. And well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate the invitation.
What is the history of the Greater Wheeling Sports and Entertainment? Why was it put into place?
Well, actually, it began as the Wheeling Municipal Auditorium Board, and then was converted to the Municipal Auditorium and Parking Authority. And then in the late 1990s, City Council, basically because of some bonds being paid off with the parking system, basically eliminated the Parking Authority part of it, and then it became the Municipal Auditorium Board. And then when Mayor McKenzie became mayor, that was at the time when the Capitol Theater came on board. The Convention and Visitors Bureau was able to acquire the theater and then turn over the management to it to Denny Magruder and his staff at the arena. There were all kinds of good reasons for doing that, mostly synergies of having the ability to move staff from the arena to the theater, from the theater to the arena, and the cost reduction associated with that. So we didn't have to maintain 2 staffs at both venues. So that's worked out very, very well. So at that time, when you added the theater, we changed the kind of the name for sure, but the mission of the board to the Greater Wheeling Sports and Entertainment Authority, because obviously at West Banco Arena, there's sports and entertainment. And then when you add the Capitol Theater in there, obviously there's a huge entertainment component that goes along with that. And then in between that, the arena staff, in conjunction with the city, was also scheduling events at Heritage Port. So not only does the Greater Wheeling Sports Entertainment Authority have a very nice arena that has recently been renovated, has the Capitol Theater, but also in between has an outdoor amphitheater.
That's great. Now there is, I guess, some complexity in that the city owns West Banco and the Heritage Port, but does not own the Capitol.
That's correct. The Capitol Theater is owned by the Convention and Visitors Bureau, but we work very, very well with them. Frank O'Brien has been a true champion of that theater. There's been millions of dollars invested in the theater. There's going to be some additional funds from ARPA put into the theater. But when they purchased it, they needed somebody to manage it. And Denny Magruder, who is retiring in October, unfortunately, had all the contacts, was aware of the various promoters that were out there, in his 30-some years at the West Banco Arena. So it just made sense to have the Greater Wheeling Sports and Entertainment Authority manage the Capitol Theater on behalf of the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So not only could he schedule, events at the theater, but if an event or a promoter felt the theater wasn't big enough, then those could be converted to the arena. And if a promoter came in and said, hey, I don't really want to do a 7,000 to 10,000 seat show at the arena, I'm more suited for the theater, they could switch them into the theater. And it's worked out very, very well. And as I mentioned earlier, now you don't have to, if we didn't have the Greater Wheeling Sports and Entertainment Authority staff, then the Capitol Theater would have to hire their own staff, their own directors, their own people to deal with promoters. And because we have that staff at West Banco Arena, we're able to have those folks utilize the Capitol Theater and not have the additional costs of 2 staffs for 2 venues.
That's great. Now, what are the exact responsibilities of the authority? For instance, you're talking about promoters coming to you. Do you, for instance, go out and look for acts, or do you just wait to see who's offering things? Or how's that taken care of?
The board at the authority oversees the executive director and his staff. And there are probably 10 or 12 full-time employees and countless part-time employees. But it's the executive director's responsibility to manage the facilities, but also to deal with promoters, to put the venues out there as available, go out and talk with promoters about bringing acts in. And then also there are just as many promoters that come to us and say, hey, what do you think about this act at this venue? And they're qualified and able to deal with those promoters and put those deals together.
Okay. Now, there is some risk involved in this. A promoter comes to you with an act and no one shows up. Is the city on the hook for any of that, or is it all the promoter's risk, or how does that?
Well, up until about a year ago, probably 95% of that risk was always on the promoter. Mm-hmm. And the problem with that was that in a small market, the promoter would come in and evaluate that risk, and sometimes on a borderline show, if the developer felt or the promoter felt that that risk was too great, even though we felt it would be a good show, because they were assuming all that risk, they would move on and not bring that act or show to Wheeling. So about a year ago, City Council set up an entertainment endowment fund of $250,000 from the city, and then the Convention and Visitors Bureau matched that. So we have a pool of $500,000 that we have put at risk to work with developers to minimize their risk when bringing a show to Wheeling that might be borderline or expensive. Now, the promoter still shares in that risk. I mean, they're part of that. There's a set of guidelines that go along with using that pool of money. But so far, it's been successful. There's only been probably 5 or 6 times where it's been used. But having that endowment fund there, and the size of it at $500,000 is a very healthy size for this size market. Mm-hmm. So we didn't underfund it, but having those funds available, gives the promoters an extra level of comfort that if they take a risk on a big time show that might be marginal for a small market, that we're sharing that risk with them.
Now, do you, because of that extra risk that you're taking, do you pay less to the promoter and keep money that would then go back into that fund, or how does it?
Well, there's a formula that goes through all the costs, rents, and things like that. So the Greater Wheeling Sports Entertainment Authority, they lay out their costs. And then, as would a developer or a promoter would, say, here's what I've got to have into this. Here's what I'm putting at risk. So the basic costs are covered. Mm-hmm. It's the at-risk part of it that that really is driven by ticket sales. Mm-hmm. That where the dollars come in. So if for example, and I don't want to oversimplify this, but let's say the Capitol Theater is being rented. If a promoter comes in, they're going to pay the rent on the theater. They're going to pay the staff, they're going to pay the stagehands, etc. And then, so those costs are covered. And then, obviously the promoter wants to make money and it has to pay the act. So they're relying upon X number of dollars of ticket sales. That's where this fund comes in, is to minimize that risk in the event that, if the act costs $50,000 and ticket sales generate $60,000, then there's a negotiation for that $10,000 risk. Okay, and it's split for the most part. So it's very fluid, but there are guidelines associated with it, but it does provide enough flexibility that we're able to go out there and say, hey, if you want to come in here with this show, and there's been a couple of children's shows, I can't think of the name of them, but that recently those funds were used. That are there going to be enough kids that want to come in and buy tickets for this? And they were successful. I think America was another one that was that the endowment fund was used on.
Okay. Today is Friday the 11th. Last night my Facebook, and yours probably too, lit up with all our friends who were at the Billy Joel concert, and there's PNC Park filled, and seats on the infield, and obviously, Billy Joel can never come to Wheeling.
Billy Joel actually played in Wheeling at one time, many years ago. Different time, but yes, Billy Joel has been in Wheeling.
Because I do remember we had Elton John. It's been a while back.
Elton John. Yeah, the Elton John was at West Banco Arena a few years back, and that was a very complicated show because Elton John is expensive and it sold out. But that was the very first time that they used what's called the dynamic pricing in Wheeling for tickets. So the ticket price changed, and that's the market now. Mm-hmm. Is the price of a ticket at an event at a larger city can change day to day, and dynamic pricing is what it's called, was used for that event. And it actually worked out okay, but the pricing changed, I think, for that event from like $80 to $150 for a ticket. So a ticket one day would be $80, it could be $150 the next day, depending on demand.
So like with the airline flies closer to the event, you're going to charge you.
Yeah, exactly. And
you know up front how much you've already made too. So.
Yeah, that's right. And so that's a whole different subject for discussion. But yeah, I mean, you know, the Billy Joels of the world, you know, they're doing their farewell tours and their last tours, et cetera, and they're going to larger cities. And the dynamic of, you know, how these acts have come through back in the 70s and 80s has changed dramatically to the fact that they're basically staying at larger venues. Occasionally we're able to land one, but there's a niche for that. For example, I mean, Seinfeld is still a major act, and Seinfeld will be coming. I mean, I'm not announcing this or anything, but there's a high likelihood if he were to go back out on tour, he would come back to Wheeling, because, you know, we were able to sell that out, and, you know, it's kind of fits into what we're trying to do at the Capitol Theater. And if Elton John came back to the, you know, we're doing smaller venues, certainly we would like to see him at West Banco Arena or Billy Joel or anybody like that. But they're so expensive that you have to have such a critical mass, such as a PNC Park, which probably had, I would say, probably 40,000 people at that event last night.
That, you know, $50 a person, and that's very low.
That's probably low, yeah. Yep.
So let's change the subject slightly. The point of this whole operation is not to entertain the citizens. The point of this operation is to bring people downtown where they're going to go to a restaurant. Some people may stay at a hotel. Certainly everyone's going to pay for parking. Tell us how this comes back through the hotel motel tax, because I think this is really slick.
Yeah, in West Virginia, there's a bed tax of 6%, which is one of the lowest in the country, and that bed tax is then, by statute, is split between the Convention and Visitors Bureau and the city. And then, so half of it goes to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and they were able to fund, you know, and they reinvest in the community big time. I mean, they're marketing, they invested in the Capitol Theater, they've invested.
They paid it off.
They paid it off. They also invested in the convention facility up here as well. You know, and so that generates bed rooms and people in beds. Which is then invested right back into the community. It's amazing how that works. And then on the city side, the other half of it, there are 5 areas that the city can use those under the code, use those funds for. The biggest thing is recreation and Convention and Visitors Bureau or arenas or theaters. So for our bed tax portion, 200,000 of that goes to West Banco Arena. And then 68,000 of that goes to Capitol Theater. And then the rest of it goes to our Parks and Recreation Commission. And then also we help with the Nailers rent as well. The point on that is that in the time that I've been in Wheeling, which is 20 years, and I think prior to that, not always, but at least for the last 22 years, the subsidy, which is bed tax, which is required to be spent on certain required issues or allowable expenses for the city, one of which is the arena, has always been $200,000. So the Greater Wheeling Sports and Entertainment Authority and Denny Magruder particularly work within their budget to the point where everything else that they do, which is $3.5 million, is all generated by the venues themselves. The only money that goes to West Banco Arena from the city of Wheeling is $200,000 of bed tax. And to me, that's extraordinary. And I would put that for municipally owned facilities across the country, particularly arenas. I would put that up against any other city in the country that basically stands alone by themselves with their own revenue and manages within their means and was able to, you know, attract enough shows and events that they're able to, you know, to fund the operations. And you know, the West Banco Arena is a beautiful facility. It's well managed, and the same thing with the Capitol Theater. So to me, that's a tribute to not only the board, but particularly to Denny Magruder and his staff for the past several years.
That's my next question. Denny, as you said, unfortunately is retiring. He's been one of the great people of this community and has done so much for it. Tell us about the search. I think the search process has started. Or is it
It has. No, it has. We advertised for the position about 3 weeks ago. And we're right now going through the first review of the resumes that have been submitted. To date, we've received, I think, 12 resumes. We are advertising across the country. We have received both local interest from applicants as well as some national interest from folks who have some experience across the country. So we're going to review those, start reviewing those resumes next week. The position is open until filled. So, if the first review and set of interviews does not produce a candidate, we're going to continue looking until we find somebody.
That's good. Okay, I promised we were going to change the subject. Tell us about the roads. As long as I've got you here, we may as well discuss this and get the word out on what's going on.
Well, there's a lot going on with roads right now.
Your hair just turned even greater.
Yeah. The nice thing about it is, or a good thing about it is, City Council has been very aggressive in appropriating funds for paving. And we just finished a $1.2 million contract, which I think paved 30 or 40 roads. This week started a second contract of $650,000, which will be done by the end of August. And then right out on the heels of that is another $1.8 million. And there's 60 some streets and alleys on that, contract. So we're being very aggressive in paving. We've been able to have not only general fund revenues to commit towards paving, but with the ARPA funds and the lost revenue calculation that we're permitted to do, council has directed funds, significant funds, from the ARPA federal funds towards paving as well, so that, the residents, it's all an allowable expense, so the residents can see the benefit of that as well. So right now, we are paving, and all these paving projects, including alleys, are in residential neighborhoods. So there's going to be some inconvenience when people are, having their street paved. They're not going to be able to park on the street. They're not going to be able to use their alleys for a couple of days. At night, it's open at night. There's no doubt there. But we try to give as much notice as we can. But typically, paving is a very fluid operations. Contractors, calculate the use of machines because we grind streets. So they have to, if they're going to have the grinding machine for a day or two, they look at what streets they can do in the same spot. So we try to give as much notice as possible. Sometimes it's less than 24 hours, but nonetheless, it is only a couple of days and the streets are paved.
What is the priority? How are things prioritized in terms of this street and the next one over isn't? I'm sure you get a lot of phone calls on it.
Yeah, we do. We look at traffic, obviously volume of traffic. We also look at condition of the streets, and then we look at when the last time they've been paved. So all those three of those kind of play into it.
Okay. And the streetscape project, I understand. I've heard you talk before, 500 pages of...
It is. Yeah, that contract has been awarded. The company that is doing the contract is very reputable. They're currently doing work for the city of Wheeling right now at our wastewater treatment plant. But they are. We anticipate them being on site in September, and it'll take 2 years to finish the project or to complete the project, which we've known all along. So we're looking forward to it. It's going to be disruptive, but we'll get through it.
We will. One final question on that. The city obviously is marketing itself all the time, and if you drive into Wheeling, it's like driving in Beirut, unfortunately, at this point. And it's not. We understand that Main and Market are also covered by the state and not the city. How do you present this to out-of-town businesses? This is what it looks like. Trust us, it's going to look like this.
Oh, excuse me. Well, we have renderings of the streetscape. So anybody that we're looking to market the community to, it's easy to say, this is going to be redone. But when you actually now we have a contract. We had an agreement. We've had an agreement with West Virginia Department of Highways for several years. I mean, certainly we market that. But now we have a contract, we have renderings, we have plans. So, it's like, you're right, it is bad. But part of the reason it's bad is because of preparation for the streetscape project. If you look down Main and Market Street, particularly Main Street, you'll see concrete patches. And same thing on Market. And that's a new storm sewer, it's a new water line. There's new water line on Market Street. the gas company, the power company, they've all done all this underground work in advance of the streetscape project, which basically has created the problem that we have now. But at the end of the day, the $10 million that's already been spent, will be done. And then when the streetscape, the $31.9 million streetscape project's put in, we should be good underground for at least 10 to 15 years before something needs to be replaced. But all that preparation and planning has gone into the project. There's been significant dollars spent, but it's also created part of what we see there today.
I want to thank you for all your hard work. And by the way, I forgot to mention this, but you were just named to the West Virginia Hall of Fame for city managers. Is that correct?
With the West Virginia Municipal League Hall of Fame, yes. And I appreciate that honor. Thank you very much.
It's
yes.
certainly well deserved. And 20 years of service for this community says a lot.
Well, thank you.
I'd like to thank you all. I'm Pete Holloway. We'll be seeing you next week.
I am completing my postmaster's educational leadership certification, and what I like about it was that I could complete it completely online. My classes each week are very structured, so I don't fall behind, yet it is flexible because I can kind of work on my own pace and I can adapt to my schedule. Even though it is online, it's set up so that you can develop personal relationships with your classmates and with the faculty.
I feel that West Liberty is preparing me to be a future leader. One of the requirements in the program is to work closely with a supervisor, and this provides the opportunity for an authentic experience.
I think school leadership development is very important for future leaders so they can get a taste of what they're going to be doing every day and help prepare them for the future.
I feel that this has been one of the most valuable professional developments that I've ever had. I've learned a lot about not only leadership, but about myself. And I feel that it has made me a better teacher.
The collaborative work that I do with Kayla is definitely very valuable. She's been a great help to us here at the school.
Recently, we have been working on scheduling for next year. We have been working on getting the students who require special education services in the right classes, if they need small group instruction or collaborative instruction. We have also worked on school discipline. I recently completed a root cause analysis on discipline referrals and suspensions, and I'm planning on using that for my final capstone project. One of my goals after completion is to someday become an administrator because I want to have an impact on improving organizational outcomes to not only better the school system but the community as well. I hope to someday foster an environment that emphasizes teamwork, innovative thinking, and equal participation to achieve objectives.
I guess if I was saying what my overall goal was, is just to be the best leader that I can be, and I want to inspire and empower others. I want to build collaborative and culturally responsive relationships within my building and throughout the county.
Connors. I'm a marketing student at West Liberty, and today I'm going to show you around my hometown of St. Clairsville, Ohio. First stop is Giacinto's Gelato and Cafe to grab a bite to eat. I'll have a grilled cheese with the gluten-free panini bread. Most people know St. Clairsville as the mall and the commercialized area, but what a lot of people don't know is that it has a lot of hidden gems and really cool, quaint little places. So, for example, one of my favorite things to do is walk down Main Street and visit all of the small businesses and locally owned shops. To Lendon's Flower and Garden to pick out some flowers. I found that St. Clairsville and West Liberty have a lot of similarities because of, well, the proximity, and I also feel like, much like St. Clairsville, West Liberty is very community oriented, and you don't have to go far to find a smiling face. As a commuter student from St. Clairsville up to West Liberty, I really like that I can still live in St. Clairsville close to the things that I like to do, but I still can get the full college experience and take advantage of all of West Liberty's opportunities. And plus, I love the pretty drive up to West Liberty every day. Now I'm headed for a walk on the St. Clairsville Bike Trail. So I would recommend West Liberty to students from St. Clairsville and Belmont County because it really gives the full university experience with a lot to choose from, like activities and athletics, but you can still be close enough to home to go home or live at home. Plus, at West Liberty, there is a metro rate, so for students like me from Belmont County, I don't have to pay full out-of-state tuition, and most of the College Credit Plus college credits will transfer into West Liberty from the area. Our last stop is Kirk's, where my sister and I are going to grab some ice cream. I chose West Liberty because I'm a homebody and I still wanted to live at home with my family, but I wanted to get the full college experience, so it was close enough for me to get that university feel but still get to live at home. And I chose my major because I someday want to open my own business, and so it was important to me to have a solid business background when I go into that someday. And it's a plus that I can someday pursue a graduate degree at West Liberty if I choose. Thanks for visiting my hometown of St. Clairsville, Ohio, and make sure to check out West Liberty University.